Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check them out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Alright, welcome back to Twisted Tales, folks. The weekend's pretty much over here, and it's back to work for the week, so that sucks, but such is life, right? Now, my next tale that I'm going to present to you here, it's going to revolve around a guy named Raymond Gerald Newman. Now, he was married to a beautiful woman named Chrissy Predham. Chrissy was a woman who had, let's say she had her ducks in a row. She was born in a wonderful Canadian province, and St. John's has a population of over 521,000, and it's about 405,212 kilometers. When she was about 4 years old, her parents weren't doing that well in the relationship department. So Chrissy and her mom Yvonne ended up dipping out, and they moved to Ottawa, Ontario. Now, during Chrissy's school years, she was a highly involved person in theater. She wrote tons of poetry. She was an Ontario scholar. She just kicked total ass at school throughout her years. Growing up outside of school, she would babysit, care for the young and the old. She matured at a young age, right? She volunteered at local nursing homes, volunteered with disabled peers, and she actually mentored these kids, right? So she did a lot of help and caring and everything for people growing up, right? Chrissy's father, Bruce, was a retired member of the St. John's Regional Fire Department, and her mother, Yvonne, ended up splitting with him, and they ended up moving to Ottawa. And Chrissy just loved her time in Ottawa here. Now, Yvonne, she made mention that she always knew that Chrissy wanted to have children, just by the way that she looked after the kids and how she was babysitting and everything, right? She was just really good with kids. When Chrissy was around the age of 16, she chose the name of Ireland for a baby girl if she ever had one down the line. Chrissy trained later on in her years as a flight attendant. She spent a year and a half working with an airline or whatnot, and after that she kind of switched it up a little bit, and she did some training as a dental assistant. So she did that for a little bit too. So she was doing quite well with her schooling, everything growing up. She was just a wicked person, right? Even though she grew up in Ontario, there's still no place like Newfoundland, right? Don't get me wrong here. Ontario's just a huge ass province, right? It's one of the largest provinces in Canada. Well, after Quebec, since Quebec's the first largest province there is in Canada. Ontario covers over 1 million square kilometers. And Newfoundland, only covers 42,000 square miles. So, it's not as up there as Quebec is, but whatever. In the fall season of 2004, she ended up moving back home so she could look after her father and be close to the family. Her father, Bruce, unfortunately, he was diagnosed with cancer. Now, this was the reason that she decided to go back home for a bit. Now, while she was home, she met a guy from St. John's, Newfoundland. His name was Raymond Gerald Newman. That guy there had a family store back home and stuff, so that's kind of how they met. They got to know each other, and the two ended up marrying in May of 2005. And a little after this, Chrissy ended up getting pregnant, and she was now expecting. Now, September rolled around, and her little girl, Ireland, was born. So Chrissy wanted to spend like a lot more time with her daughter. So she started up her own like little daycare center for kids in her home. So I mean that's good for her to help other members of the community out with their kids and whatever, right? They can drop them off, she'll look after them kind of thing. Which is kind of cool because that's like the whole path that she kind of flew like her whole life, right? Like with the babysitting, the learning all that stuff early and all that too, right? And Ireland was very well looked after by like Chrissy, and she had a big family and everything back home in Newfoundland, so there was always somebody like coming over, or she was always going over somewhere to see the family and everything. And everything seemed decent, like minus a few arguments here with like her husband Raymond and shit, but she started to begin to think like that maybe she kind of rushed into shit with this guy, and that like she had a little feeling that he wasn't right for her. And this was a feeling that she got around like the time of the wedding too. But like she just went on with it and everything, right? Maybe it was just pre-wedding jitters or something too, right? So the honeymoon here went to shit not long after marrying. Raymond was like verbally abusive to Chrissy. It's usually how it starts out, right? Like it'll stem deeper into physical abuse over time, depending on like how much of an asshole you are or whatever, right? And that's only sometimes. I mean, not always, but more often than not, this happens, right? I'm not saying it's gonna happen every time, but just people are dicks. What can I say? Now it was just a little easier for Chrissy to kind of dip out and avoid all this nonsense, right? She didn't need it, like not around her new little one, right? So she was all gung ho to head out and distance herself from this guy, right? Like this guy was just a goof. Now they had a nice home and everything together too. Like don't get me wrong, like nothing, nothing ever starts out to be like shit, right? Like, but over time it does happen, right? Like there's gonna be points in your life, like when you be like, hey, like you guys meet, you fall in love, kind of thing. Like there's not always gonna be bad times, but sometimes that happens. So she started documenting like things about their relationship and stuff like that. So she wrote down a bunch of documents here. This was to cover a period of December 24th, 2004 to November 5th, 2006. So that was a little time frame of her like whole relationship with this guy kind of thing, right? Now at one time, Chrissy, she called up Raymond's mom. Doreen Newman was her name. Now, this was during their relationship and whatnot. She mentioned that she was being kind of nervous here, and it was more so in the nighttime when he was in the house. Like, I get it, they live together, and but sometimes like some guys work nights and shit like that. But like when he was home, she kind of felt like a little uneasy, and she would just have a weird feeling that he was gonna hurt her in her sleep. Now, she asked Doreen to come stay with her here one night there. This was back in September of 2006. And this is just to give you guys like a little background on a couple things in their relationship. And I'll go into further detail on like some other stuff here that happened. Chrissy began pushing for divorce so she could seek custody of her daughter, move away, and then take her daughter with her. She made plans to like move out of the matrimonial home here soon. So the focus on all this was to get her part of the equity from the house, and then this would help finance them to get their move to Ontario. The thing is with this too, Raymond would be totally unaware of her plans to relocate with their daughter. He was kind of left in the dark about that. But unfortunately, these plans didn't work out. Now, January 21st, 2007, after not hearing from Chrissy in a few days, her aunt and uncle decided to pop by her apartment just to see if she was okay or whatever, right? Because, she had the kid and everything, and it wasn't very often that she wasn't in contact with them, right? It was pretty much a daily thing, right? It was just a little bit out of pocket for her. So, like, for her not to call or message or what have you, right? Now, the family that showed up was Aunt and Uncle Sandra and Bruce Harvey. They stopped by her place and they found Chrissy's lifeless body. She'd been stabbed several times and her throat had been slit. She was just left lying in a pool of her own blood in her basement apartment. Now that's where they found her when they walked in. Originally, she had plans to relocate that upcoming New Year, January 31st, 2007. She was killed on January 21st, 2007. Upon the discovery of their niece's body, the local police were called in and they would arrive on the scene rather quickly. A forensic pathologist had indicated to a sergeant named Roberts that Mrs. Newman's death was at least 8 hours prior to their investigating and the inspection of her body. So this happened around 8:30 p.m. when they got there and everything. So the time of her death was somewhere between the 1 p.m. mark of that day. So sometime in the afternoon. Now, obviously, police are going to question, like, people in the family, her soon-to-be ex-husband, people that, like, just live in the general area and shit like that, right? Like, people that knew her and stuff, friends and whatnot. So they just wanted to start, like, to piece together this crime and steer towards solving it. Now, the police had gathered up some info here that they heard from others about Raymond. Now, it was said here that he was verbally abusive and would sometimes call her names the odd time, right? Now, in 2005, a friend of Chrissy's here, this was Sarah Pepper. She had popped down to Newfoundland, down from Ottawa. She was just here for a visit. She saw Chrissy, and then they met up and they just hung out for a little bit, right? She had ended up meeting her in dental school back in 1999 there. Now, she made mention that Chrissy was focused on having her upcoming baby. She seemed to be pretty happy around this time. Then 2006 rolls around. Sarah is back in Newfoundland for one of her co-workers' weddings, so she now stayed at the Newman residence. But this time around, Chrissy seemed a little off because she was pretty discouraged about the weight that she had gained during pregnancy, and she was unable to lose it. Now, a little later on here in the month, a phone call between the two friends happened. Now, Chrissy told her that Raymond was making like snarky comments about her weight, calling her a fat pig and a fatso. So these were things that he was saying to her, like stuff to that degree, I guess. Like, that's supposed to be your husband, like the one that cares for you, and he's saying that shit, right? But after this, the phone calls between the two would actually become more frequent over the next little while. Now, Chrissy told Sarah all about her plans to move into her new place at Airport Heights. So she didn't want to live with Raymond anymore, is what she was getting at. Because she kind of felt wicked uncomfortable, and she was a little embarrassed by like all of these events that were shaken down, right? But shit happens in life. Sometimes marriages don't necessarily work out, whatever, it's not a big deal. And another time in 2006, this was around Christmas time. So Chrissy was up in Ontario. So Sarah had visited because she lived up around that way. And they spent some time together, they hung out. And Chrissy made mention about getting a lawyer involved with some certain stuff to do with the house and Raymond, because Raymond had refused to end up leaving the home. The lawyer had told her to start documenting certain stuff, like times that they would see each other, when they had visits with his daughter, stuff like that. You know, all the timeline stuff, I guess. And it was noted that Raymond wanted to try to reconcile here on 2 occasions, but Chrissy was having none of that. She didn't want anything to do with this guy, right? So police ended up taking down like all Sarah Pepper's like notes and everything there, and this was all saved for court and everything going forward. Now, they just wanted to get like a little bit of info here just to figure out how the relationship was going between the two. And one last thing here that Sarah mentioned is this was that Chrissy had sent her a new phone number by email just to keep in touch. Now, police had spoken to the movers too that ended up moving Chrissy from the couple's home over to her basement apartment up in Airport Heights. The two movers were Alan Coombs and worker Blair McGrath. These two moved her from the matrimonial home and over to Airport Heights. While they were on the property, so was Raymond and his daughter, Ireland. The movers made mention that Mr. Newman had left sometime after they got there, but he was pretty polite and cooperative. During Mr. Newman's absence, Chrissy had gave the address of her new place to the movers, and she made mention that they shouldn't give it to Raymond, give the address to him, because she didn't want him to find out where she lived at this time. And she also double-checked this with the boss of the moving company too, because she didn't want to disclose any of this information, right? Police rounded up Mr. Newman here for some questioning. And on that night, they found Newman up at his parents' house with his daughter Ireland. The two officers at this time were a Constable Warren and a Sergeant Roberts. So they were getting ready to talk to Mr. Newman here at his parents' place. This was up on Pennywell Road. So when he was taken in for questioning and all that, police didn't tell him that Chrissy was murdered. They mentioned that she was dead and that they were investigating it, and that was it. You'd think that, that would be the first thing that you would mention, right? Like, it would have some importance as to why you picked this guy up in the first place, right? And he was not read his rights when he was arrested either. They began to interrogate him for a half hour, 45 minutes before his rights were read to him. While they were doing this, they ended up getting some incriminating evidence, whatever, right? And they tried to use that against him throughout this. So they got all that information prior to reading his rights and shit. But they couldn't do anything with this now because they didn't read him his rights prior to this, right? So that was out the window. They know what they're supposed to be doing. They're police, right? They're trained for all this. And just for that to happen, that's just crazy. It wouldn't be the first time that they kind of fumbled up this case either here. I don't know. Another little thing I found here is while researching all this here, when they did read him his rights and stuff, the officers had minimized the jeopardy that he currently seemed to be in. They literally said he shouldn't read too much into it, as if it was just more of a formality here. And the questioning went on for some time here. By now the officers were just making comments that Mr. Newman knew more than he was letting on. They thought that he had murdered his wife Chrissy by this time now. So Mr. Newman then requested to end the interview several times. He made mention that he wanted his lawyer's advice, and he wanted to invoke on his right to silence. This should have ended things right there, until the lawyer was contacted and brought in, mind you, right? But the questions kept flying out of nowhere, every which way but loose. And they were becoming more forceful with each question. Now, during all this time here, there was no mention of him being detained or that he was free to go, anything like that. Even when he was asked if he was under arrest, Sergeant Roberts replied with, no. And that right there, just right off the bat, the police did a shitty job with this case. Most of their proceedings and everything that had been done were done on assumptions here, because they just tried to obtain incriminating evidence from him. He made mention of something or whatever, right? So they kind of fed off that and then got more angry about the questioning and shit like that. Even when Newman had asked if he could take his own vehicle to the police station before this, he was told that he would have to travel by police car to the headquarters. So all in all, Newman ended up giving a 3-hour statement to the officers voluntarily on the night of the homicide. And at the end of the interview, Newman had his arms and his hands photographed by police. Something that he freely, didn't want to do on his own accord, but he just went along with it and did it so he can get the fuck out of this interview, right? Now, after this, they drove him back to his parents' house. They asked him for his keys to his vehicle, and then they seized the keys to his car. They told him not to go near it, not to go near his home, because they intended to obtain search warrants for both places. And they posted surveillance units here at his vehicle and his home until the search warrants were issued. This was some 4 days later. So when he got back to his parents here, this was about 3 a.m. now. This was January 22nd. So they kept surveillance on his car, like I mentioned. And they did a search on the vehicle here that was carried out January 22nd that morning. But this was before they got the search warrant. They didn't have anything to say that they could search this guy's stuff. Now, this was the couple's vehicle, right? Like, they shared this. And without the correct documents to search this vehicle, it would eventually just be excluded as evidence, no matter what they found inside, right? And this vehicle here was used by both parties. Mr. Newman had used the car to pick her up from the airport on New Year's Eve 2006. This was 3 weeks before her murder, and had brought her back to her own apartment, right? So he knew where she lived, right? But I don't know, they had a weird relationship, I guess. But police had found a stain on the console of the vehicle. It was also photographed. The stain was about 4 centimeters in length, 2 centimeters in width, and it was swabbed up and it was collected. Now, there was also a stain on the transmission console here that had the appearance of blood, and it had a mixed profile DNA from both parties. A third sample was taken back from the black passenger seat handle. Now, it did not have the appearance of blood or anything like that, but it yielded a positive reaction for blood. This was done for spray or whatever, right? So all of this evidence was gathered up during this bumbling ass procedure by police officials. Now, the only thing these cops had was a hunch to go off of, pretty much, because the evidence that was in the vehicle wasn't enough to act on without obtaining a warrant, right? So they used the information that was obtained in this earlier illegal statement to try to get these warrants moving and shit. So now all these warrantless searches would just make everything that they did null and void, pretty much. Yeah, that's fucking it. Even if they found anything incriminating from these searches, that would link this guy to Chrissy's death, it wouldn't have been accepted in court. I don't know, it's just, most of their evidence here is it's not admissible, and it's in violation of this guy's rights. It's if they would have given the proper documentation to do all this, then yeah, it would have been all legal, would have been fine, right? And the same thing with some of the earlier interviews here that they did here, about the 2 separate claims of assault here. They could ask Chrissy's friends what they thought about the couple, and if she had told them about this, they could go by dates and stuff like that. But even some of the stuff that she had documented in her book there, her 11-page documents, the dates there that she had given that these happened were different from the ones that friends remember. They found a stain located in the hallway. Some contents from the vacuum here found at the home of Newman. Now, the stain from the hallway, they tested, this tested positive for DNA on both Newman and his wife. So this had been detected throughout the use of special lighting. Now, this was both their home at one point, so I mean, it's not unusual to find DNA of both in the house. And the contents of the vacuum here was looked at, but it was inconsistent results for the process of blood and stuff like that. The receipt for the shoes was a pair of size 10 New Balance sneakers, model MX894. So this was found located in the drawer of Newman's bedroom night table. So this was from a sport check at the Village shopping center there. The sneakers were never found in Newman's possession, and there's no direct evidence that he had purchased them for himself, or they never found these shoes. They found the receipt, and that's pretty much it. So as it seems this guy's charter rights were totally violated here, pretty much from the first moment that he had met police. Raymond Gerald Newman had no prior criminal record to all this either. And this is something that lawyers would try to click into here to make him not seem like he was a bad guy during all this court shit, right? Now, another thing here, there was a kid's backpack here that was looked at. It had 9 little spots, droppings throughout it or whatever. So that was tested, but it came back negative for blood too. So that was something else that they found. The police had a bunch of evidence here now that they could go through and check with all these swabs and stuff and send it off to see if there was any blood or DNA evidence on it, because this would have to be sent back for testing, and this would take some time. And the way things were looking for Mr. Newman here, he could now be charged with second-degree murder and the death of his estranged wife, Chrissy Predham Newman. There's another thing that I thought of here, even with all this evidence going on and stuff, all the stuff that Chrissy was doing, setting up her move with her daughter, and this guy didn't know about it. She didn't mention it to him. What if he had found out about this, right? What if that pissed him off? But I doubt it. I don't know, something to think about. I mean, it could have something to do with this. And you gotta cover all angles when you're investigating too, right? So, with all the investigation continuing on everything, charges were now laid and the trial was now set to be underway here. Lawyers were called, all of that fun stuff, and everything shook down about 2 years later, because they had to wait for the test for the DNA and shit, and Newman ended up being arrested here and charged with second-degree murder in June 2009. So it took about 2.5 years of messing around with police work and investigations, talking to people, everything to get to this point. So during all this trial stuff here, the courtroom, they heard from friends of Chrissy's, her family, her ex-husband, all this stuff, right? So they just had to keep going with this and try to get a sentence out of it. Now, some of her friends had mentioned her relationship with Raymond, the police had talked about the case and some other things here were brought up. And at one point, when she moved out, Chrissy swung by the police station to file a complaint against Mr. Newman here. This was back on November 13th of 2006. Now, she had spoke to a constable, Barry Cody. So he was at the front desk when Chrissy had rolled in to report that her husband, Raymond Newman, had assaulted her on 2 separate occasions. August 13th, 2006 here. This is where he grabbed her by the arm, which left her a significant bruise. And the second was September 11th, 2006. The guy spit in her face here during an argument. So that was pretty much assault. This is where she went with this, to the police. So she had with her an 11-page typed document labeled Assault Details, which included the incidents and about her relationship with him. She was then calm by this time, she wasn't upset or anything in any way here. The officer read the document silently to himself, and she told him she wanted to press charges, if possible. But since these alleged assaults were not concurrent, well, recently I guess, Constable Cody didn't assign the complaints for immediate investigation. So Mrs. Newman respected her lateness in reporting these allegations. Mrs. Predham had told the officer that she did not wish to report the matters, just wanted to keep them, documented or whatever, right? Miss Predham told the officer that she did not wish to report the matters at the time because she and Mr. Newman were still living together in their home. So when she left the home and she was talking to the officer about it now, it was thought that maybe perhaps, since she had made these statements and issued these documents to the police, that this was an attempt to paint this dude in a dark light or something like that, right? So police would end up just talking to some of Chrissy's friends and relatives and shit here about these 2 incidents. But they didn't witness them. They just heard her mentioning it and telling them about it. Now, this was nothing they could do about it, right? It was all just he said, she said bullshit. But now there was a youth worker here that was notified too. Now, her name was Amy Foss. So she showed up at Chrissy's place here, and because she mentioned the assaults or whatever, so all of this had happened in the presence of a child, so she was notified. Now, the meeting was quick here. It was on the front porch of their home. She chatted with Ray. She wrote down some key words, to which she later discarded. Mr. Newman never got an opportunity to check these notes to confirm an accuracy on the details. Now, this statement was not taken under oath, and nor was it recorded. And that was pretty much it. It was just a conversation. Now, the thing here that the Crown also had some issues to and listened on and he focused on was the 11-page document here from Chrissy. Like, it was decided by the Crown that they would not let it be admitted into evidence because they didn't know whether it was like a rational written up thing or like an irrational written up thing, because this could have been made in anger after an argument, something like that. She could have made this up, or maybe there was some truth to it, right? Maybe she was just trying to get some help. Now, the Crown didn't take a chance on that, and he kiboshed that part of the documents. So, the whole spitting and the grabbing incidents too, like when he asked her friends like about that, they touched base on the relationship between the couple, the dates of the assaults noted in the documents. They didn't match up with the dates that Chrissy had stated either here, so that was another reason that this part was all disregarded and it wasn't put into evidence due to it was all just hearsay. Now, there was a guy here from the forensic unit here. He had got on the stand and he had dealt with the computer side of shit. So he had testified about the computer that was seized from her apartment, which they had used a computer program to copy the contents off of her computer. So they found two relevant documents. The first was titled Assault Details. The second was titled Dates Ray had visited Ireland. So, meaning his daughter. Their daughter. He had told them that the documents first appeared on her computer November 12th, 2006. So these were made up literally the day before that she went to the police officer with these notes. Now, there was also a document here saved for her lawyer on there, but they didn't obtain a copy of it, they just left it as is. Another thing here, even though it was her personal computer, there was no way to tell, who these notes had been written by. And the notes just were saved about the visitations and stuff like that with his daughter and whatnot. They weren't relevant to the current charges against Newman, so they were only discussed and not put into evidence. Now, they had talked to Ray, on his comments, verbal abuse and shit here towards Chrissy, but it had mostly been hearsay too, so that was not taken in as evidence either. But everything else that they could work with, now with everything that got jumbled around in here regarding the warrants and stuff, even with his testimony too, not being read his rights and stuff, not telling Raymond that she was murdered, just that she was dead, all this had played a huge part in how the police had started running with this case. The samples that were sent away didn't get far either, there was a stain in the car here that were from both of them. So since they were potential contributors, this wasn't used as evidence either, because it could have came from both of them at any time, right? Now, the car was used by both parties. They couldn't figure out who the potential contributor was for all this, right? Because it could have been both of them, right? So the justice also lost his shit here because he was very harsh on the police here when they talked about their searches and evidence that was used in the crime due to their fucking incompetence and stuff. Due to all the shitty police work that was done throughout this, Justice James Adams had found Raymond Gerald Newman's rights were totally violated pretty much since the first crack of the bat. And he was acquitted of the whole kit and caboodle. So he was now able to walk freely back into society. So Newman's family here didn't really like this too much, so they screamed out a bunch of shit at him here. Newman's family actually said, they praised all this, right? So it was just a mixed emotions during the whole court thing here. The Pradham family didn't take it too well. There was a family member here that got upset, yelled at Newman before she burst into tears. Now, someone yelled out, "You've got to face God," just minutes after the whole sentencing was all done with and shit, or what have you. They also, the woman also screamed out, "You won't get off that easy. You'll pay one way or another. You son of a bitch. You'll get yours." Now, the woman sobbed uncontrollably, then yelled at Newman a little bit more. She was taken out here by like family members and stuff into the hallway. She became so upset that she was held back by sheriffs, and then she collapsed on the floor, crying. And an ambulance showed up minutes later, and then she was taken to the hospital here. I actually have a clip of that here. I'll play that at the end of this episode. And there you have it, folks. Like, this case here was just a fucking gong show. And in my honest opinion, like, all the police work that was put into this went fucking nowhere because they had no patience to wait for certain documents to get this thing on the go. Like, what if this guy did have something to do with her murder and they couldn't do shit now? With this guy out into society, he could now just fucking walk around, do his thing, right? And since he was out now, he would have to go through courts yet again to fight for visitations with his daughter. And she was a little bit older now by this time, right? And sometime during this whole thing here, the family of Chrissy, they started running like a memorial golf tournament. This is to raise money for a trust fund for schooling for Chrissy's daughter. So, I mean, that was aces of them for them to do that. Good for them. Give it some time here, and this fella, Newman, would actually be back in the old spotlight here yet again. Now, Newman would be in trial in St. John's for assaulting his former girlfriend, Nicole Young. This was at his home in Paradise. Now, she made claims that she was punched, choked, and dragged around by him. He made claims that she attacked him while he was sleeping, and the most that he did was push her off of him. Yeah, buddy, like, we believe that. So the woman testified by video in another room, and this was at provincial court in St. John's. The woman said the pair had gone out for an early supper, and they were getting ready to go out, have a few drinks, a couple games of pool, and when they went out, they shot some pool, they had some shots at the bar, some beers, and then they left when the place got too crowded. And Newman kind of, like, he kind of got upset, tensed up about the whole crowd things. He wasn't a big fan of crowds, right? Now, this kind of stemmed over into an argument on the way home in her SUV. So she doesn't remember, like, how it started, but Newman became, like, very rude, very ignorant, and both were drunk at the time. So, I mean, you can just imagine going back and forth battles when you're pissed off and drunk, right? It happens. She became so fed up with being called down when she just said frig this and she had enough. So she started sticking up for herself. Once home, the argument blew up, it escalated, and Newman just straight up grabbed a hold of her right by the throat, and something that he had never did before. Then he dragged her around by the leg, trying to throw her out of the house, and then he began to choke her. So he had her by the throat here, up against a wall at one point, and then he was like totally leaning into this, like squeezing so hard that she remembers that she started to see black. And then once this happened, she took a huge gasp of air and then punched him right in his fucking face. And then she hit him in his nose. And he legit was fighting for her life. Like, Newman let go once he started to bleed. Like, he realized that. And then edit. And then she got into her SUV and drove off to the police station around 5 a.m. but she returned when no one responded to her banging on the door. So she pulled up. She ended up sleeping in her car until the next morning. Newman ended up tapping on her window. So she sat up, like he saw her face, and he said to her, "Oh, I didn't do that." And yeah, then she just went inside the house, she cried, she looked in the mirror. And then when Newman left for work or whatever, she took a nap. Then police officers had arrived to her house around supper time there. This was because Newman himself had actually called them to report a domestic dispute. Newman was charged and released, and he was now to await a court date. Say that 10 times fast. Now, he had an order to stay away from the woman here. He ended up getting a 90-day sentence for all this. This was in Her Majesty's penitentiary here for the assault and what have you. They tried getting this dude like on house arrest and shit, but he said no dice, and he didn't fucking go with that deal. So after all this shit, Raymond now has troubles finding employment, and when he does, they usually find out about his charges, and then they just let him go from employment. And rightfully so. Like, I'm sure he's gonna have further issues going forward just because he's a piece of shit. And Yvonne Harvey, Chrissy's mother, had called this whole court case surrounding her daughter a total bastardization of the word justice. And the uncle of Chrissy here, the guy that found her in her basement apartment at 36A Buryport Street, had went to Nicole's trial too. He was like speaking up against victims of domestic violence and stuff like that. So, he's a good guy. Ruth and Sandra Harvey, now this was the aunt and uncle here, they were also tossed into some court stuff here with Mr. Newman. This was for full custody of Chrissy's child, Ireland. So this caused the Harveys like tens of thousands in legal fees and stuff like that. But they were very successful in obtaining permanent custody of Chrissy's daughter. The mother of Yvonne still celebrates her daughter's birthday every year, and since this whole case has dropped the charges, it now becomes an unsolved case. And that sucks. All of this work just fucking gone by shitty police work. And as we wind down here a moment here, folks, this was my episode on Raymond Newman and Chrissy Pradham. And I thought this case was like a little misdirected with the whole justice thing and the searches and stuff, but just sucks they can't do shit with this case now, not until they come up with some new evidence and whatnot. So, with that, folks, I'd like to thank you very much for tuning back into my show. And you can also check me out on YouTube there now. Just search Twisted Tales there. I'll pop up. So, have a wonderful time, folks.
First of all, yesterday was a very difficult day. How are you feeling today?
Today, Caroline, I'm feeling much better, I must say. Yesterday it was very overwhelming for me and all my family, but being down in the courthouse and hearing that, Mr. Newman had been acquitted, yes, it was quite a shock, but overnight I've, thought a lot about it. I just want to be a voice for our niece Chrissy, because she no longer has a voice.
When you heard the judge say, Mr. Newman, you're free to go,
that was really hard to hear, because I had it built up in my mind that, there was going to be a trial. He was going to be convicted. All of those things. And to hear that, it was like just a major slap in the face, like, oh, you're free to walk. And it's like him and his family were the victims, and like we were just, like we didn't matter. And it's not us, but we're fighting, we're fighting for Chrissy,
You say that you'd like to be a voice for Chrissy. What do you think she would say about everything that happened?
Chrissy was a very intelligent young lady. she had all her ducks in a row, so to speak, and things like that. Chrissy was a battered woman. She was abused. That's a known fact. She spoke out about it as well. And I think she would want to see him punished for what he did. But she wouldn't want to lose her voice. She would want us to continue on for her and to keep the momentum going, so that something would eventually happen, you know. I mean, she was a beautiful woman. God didn't take her life, you know. Somebody else took it. And nobody has that right.
When you were in the court yesterday, you had such an emotional response to what happened. You know, when you saw the video of it afterwards, you know, what did you think?
First thing I thought was total embarrassment on my family, because I had broken down like that. I had used some language that I don't normally use. I'm sorry. But it was like something came over me, and it was like it wasn't even me speaking. And I just looked at him, and when I looked at him, I saw Chrissy's face, and I just latched it. I did, on radio this morning, apologize to, you know, the sheriffs, but everybody down there, Caroline was so accommodating and so kind. And I would like to thank them for that. And the ENTs who brought me to the hospital as well.
What happened?
I don't know. I had a stroke a couple of months ago, and I had a major surgery, and I was coming down the stairs, and when I got to the second layer of the stairs, I started to become dizzy and got some pain in my head, and then I started to see black stars, and I knew something was about to happen, and I fainted for probably a minute. I saw Mr. Newman out in the foyer, and people were hugging him and stuff like that, and I just screamed a couple of things at him, and I went down. I was only out briefly a minute, but my blood pressure had spiked, and that was their concern, so that's why they brought the EMTs in. Yeah.
And, you know, what was the general family reaction to yesterday, to the acquittal?
They're devastated. I mean, you know, Chrissy, it's been like over 5 years going on, and it should have been over and done with, you know, and there's been a lot happening, like going back and forth to courts and listening to different things and hearing different things, and you're confused, and you just want, you know, you want to keep that momentum going, but it's like yesterday, it was like time just stood still. Everything stopped. When they said he was acquitted, everything stopped.
West Tales.